We are joined by our good friend, once again, Dr. Andrea Douglas. Dr. Douglas.
Hello.
Hi.
How are you all?
Good. You're looking mighty Angela Davis here today.
Hey, get him.
Looking mighty Black Panther here today.
Yeah, it's the fall.
Don't start none, won't be none.
When somebody tells you who they are, believe it. Miss Maya.
Yeah.
It's the fall, so we're switching looks.
No, you look great. You look amazing.
Yeah. But was Dr. Douglas, was Dr. Davis an inspiration? Actually, I kind of get that vibe too.
Actually, she was.
Okay.
Yeah, I've read her autobiography about 4 or 5 times, and I've used to teach it when I taught. Because one of the things I like most about her and her language is that she describes her methodologies as tools. She's never really didactic. She says, I use this tool for this. I use that tool for this. Feminism is a tool for a different set of ways of thinking about things.
Gotcha.
And, I'm a firm believer in bringing in as many ideas as you possibly can in order to then make decisions that are strategic.
Yeah.
So,
right.
yeah, she is very important to me.
That is awesome. That is deep. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are joined by none other than executive director of the Jefferson School's African American Heritage Center, Dr. Andrea Douglas. So, Dr. Douglas, before we get into the nitty gritty of, particularly what brings you in today, here's a question that I want to ask that I think is crucial because it's how we kicked off the show. It's how we started. It's how we started the show.
And I'm worried about this. I'm like,
I don't know if you've noticed this, but we've had a few guests come in over the course of the past 2-3 months, and when they get here, they say, I'm here to talk about blank. They know we be here. Dr. Douglas did that today.
She did. But we got a good relationship. You can trust me.
I trust you. And I'll do my best.
Yeah, I won't lead you off a cliff. You know that. But no, the question I have, because it's even how we started the show, and there's a lot going on right now. I was like, did we ever ask Dr. Douglas this question? Because we always talk about the Heritage Center. And we may have asked you, but I think it's worth reiterating. What does it mean to you personally to be a part of that school, to be a part of the Jefferson School? Like, so if you kind of look at, you and the Heritage Center, look at the school from a 30,000 foot view, like, personally, and even when we talk about your activism and the meaning for the Heritage Center to be housed within that Jefferson School, what does that mean to you and the Heritage Center?
Well, it's everything. I mean, people, it's not inexpensive for us to inhabit that space, right? There are other places that an institution like ours could live, but we are the Jefferson School African American Heritage Center because we were created to tell the story of the Jefferson School. And, being someone who's not from Charlottesville, and before I started that job, I spent a lot of time in galleries and places elsewhere. I worked for the university and their museum. And so when I took the job was the first time I really felt like I lived in this place.
Okay.
And then I often say, this is one of the stories of the African American community here is compelling. That if you want to understand the trajectory of Black people in this country from the minute they are brought here, this is a community that you can do that in, right? And the other part of it is that when I got here, it was really hard to figure out Charlottesville, right? And
why?
Well, because if you're a historian and you want to write histories, right, and you start thinking about Virginia, let's say, you hear about Richmond and you hear about Norfolk. Charlottesville isn't in the books. And one of the reasons why we even created a catalog before we even opened an exhibition was so that Charlottesville would be a book. Okay. Right? So that people could find out more about it. And so, I mean, I can give you a full-on history about, land plats from the 1730s that form this place that then forms a system of enslavement that makes this portion of the Virginia the fourth richest location as a consequence of cattle slavery. But this new exhibition that we're opening have opened, towards a lineage of self, that comes from a line in something called the Credo that was written by W.E.B. Du Bois in 1934.
Okay.
And I don't know it exactly, but he's talking about his belief in the pride of self.
Mm-hmm.
He's talking about his belief in the pride of lineage.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why we titled that portion of the exhibition, because what that exhibition traces is that very moment that Black people start to purchase property and build themselves, right?
Is that to insulate the not just the white slave owners, but the presidents and everything that's in this area? Like, it's like 5 of them that held significance in America. So to highlight us, would that diminish them in their eyes? Is that why it's been insulated?
No, I don't think so. I think that it is about, because I think Black people know Black people's stories. There's a moment where white people begin to want to know Black people's stories. And then white people begin to tell the stories that they think are important in their narrative, right? You can always talk about the presidents, but you're never going to be able to divorce those homes from the very people who were working in them. And those very people,
Though they try,
are in the rooms and they're hearing conversations about freedom. They bring with them a sense of freedom. So the very minute that they have the capacity to be free, they begin to articulate that freedom by first buying property, by opening a school, by building churches. And when you go on a tour with me, I take you to Main Street and I point out those 4 churches, not Zion Union, because Zion Union doesn't exist. But those churches are built within 20 years of each other, right? But they're not just any old church, right? They're all brick churches. They're all highly ornamented churches. And by the time you get to looking at Ebenezer, the rebuild of Ebenezer, that's an American translation of an international Gothic style, right? So there's a way in which these people are in their own landscapes building things that articulate who they want to be.
That's right.
Right? So, you know, when you go to the Jefferson School, and just to talk about this logo, right? Look at the front of the Jefferson School, right? On Commerce Street, right? There are diamonds across the front of that, right? There's diamonds across when you're on 4th Street, from the point that you get to the beginning of the 1926 building to its end, there are diamonds across that. There is an ornament on that building that, although it's a state building, it's still in conversation with all the other things around it, right? So if you can tell those kinds of stories, you're not talking about the kinds of general discourse that you hear that is always a thing about what Black people don't have, right? Or the fact that you can't see the activity of Blackness in our landscape because of gentrification. You, in fact, can, right? You can go in and see a Black vernacular architecture, Black people building buildings that are still here, right? You just have to know these things in order to realize those truths, right? And if the overarching conversation is about what we don't have and not on the other side,
that's right,
then this community doesn't have a chance to actualize as best as it can, right?
Like that.
You know, the work that we do is about belonging. We're attempting to resuscitate stories that are already part of us, but put them in a place. So back to your question, why is it important for the African American Heritage Center to be in the Jefferson School? The Jefferson School in and of itself is an artifact. It is a thing that stands in conversation with other things that describes who we are. Right?
Love it. Love it.
It is the work that we do then creates a space of permanence, right? You come to our permanent exhibition, you can come any day of the week. It doesn't come off the wall. We add to it every day. Towards a lineage of self is over 100 stories that begins with the first purchase of property, 1868. in Kellytown, and takes you all the way through to late 20th century. So this is almost 100 years of activity on the part of Black people. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, so I love Jordy and his work. Like he's like a mad scientist to me, and I find it highly interesting. Like seeing him present, hearing him talk, and and yourself as well. But I thought about Jordy because I'm sitting here thinking, Max and Reza, like, but how do we make it sexy? Because I hear what you're saying, but I still feel like one of the part is like it's almost one of those things to where if you are in the know, or like the old saying, if you have an ear to hear, let those who have an ear to hear, let them hear, kind of thing. But it's like I feel like whether it's generationally or whether it's like
it's sexy enough to me. I think it's a matter of value.
to us. But that's my whole point. We're sitting here because it's sexy to us. I'm saying to the people who don't find it sexy, but they need to know this because this is what gives you self-worth.
Yeah.
This is what builds your self-esteem.
I'm sorry.
But this is part of what I've come to talk about too.
Yeah.
But before I even jump on that, can I just tell you about, this is actually to your point.
Yeah.
Okay. So the exhibition that is in our contemporary gallery is about a woman named Alice Ivory. Let's say you don't know anything about Alice Ivory at all.
Okay.
You walk into that gallery and there are 9 objects in there made by a woman who's using an acetylene torch, right? So she's a welder. And when you see what she can do with metal and fire, and the way she can articulate those objects so that they aren't just a crow. There's a crow with personality. It's not just a dog. You look at that dog and you're like, that's a junkyard dog because it's got aggressiveness, right? There is a buffalo in there that the modeling on it. And then you go to her smaller pieces. So let's say you don't know anything about her. You're just in that room and you have the capacity to marvel. Right? I can tell you today what is the very first piece of art that I ever saw that took my breath away. Right?
That's right.
It was a photograph by Roy DeCarava. I saw it in the Metropolitan Museum of Art.
Okay.
Took my breath away. I walked into that Alice Ivory show and all I could think was, holy crap. Now, let me tell you her story.
Yeah.
Right? She's born in Whitehall. She goes to the school out there.
Okay.
She goes to Albemarle Training School. She's going 12 miles, traveling 12 miles to go to Albemarle Training School. After she graduates from Albemarle Training School, she goes to Virginia State. Why? Because she can't go to school here.
Right.
And during that period, Black people had to leave if they wanted an education. She's born in 1930. So by the time she's doing that, it's, in the 40s, 50s, right? So she goes to Virginia State and she gets a degree in art education, right? She comes back 1952 through 1960. She's at Burleigh teaching art. She's part of the tradition of Black people from the minute they open a school here that leave here, go get an education at Hampton and Howard and all these other places and bring it back. Right. And when you think about the influence of those institutions on the notion of self and Blackness, what are they teaching our teachers? And what do our teachers come back and teach our children?
Yeah.
Right. There is a moment that we as Black people are engendering into our own children our sense of self.
That's right.
Right.
That's right.
So
it's almost the opposite of what was happening at UVA with eugenics.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. Yeah. And doing that within a construct and a landscape. I mean, so we're talking 2 different exhibitions, Towards a Linear Self, and we're talking Alice Ivory on the same page, on the other side. But the 2 of them speak to each other in significant ways, right? Because at the end of it all, when you hear our story, and then you walk in and you see what this person has made,
that's right.
How do you not lose your breath?
Right.
How are you not in awe?
Right.
Why would you never see that as sex?
Yeah.
right? And when people say there's nothing to do in Charlottesville, yes, there is. Go see that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because that is a master, right? Two of the works in that exhibition come from the Virginia Museum of Fine Art, right? They're there because Alice Ivory won awards that caused them to enter those works into their collection. If you know anything about the Virginia Museum of Fine Art, it starts in the 1930s. It's one of the 10th, maybe even in the top 5 now because they're adding on museums in the country. And her work is there. Again, you don't have to know too much. You just need to walk in to that space.
Yeah.
And if you're someone who marvels at the capacity of people to create, then there's nothing else to do but be in awe of that. And that's sexy.
Yeah. I love it. Thank you for that.
And we as human beings by nature are creators. So.
Right. And people who are creating with what people want to say with not a lot. But what we do know how to do is make a way out of no way, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Do more with less.
That's right. Now, speaking of like art, that's right. And speaking of like creation and art and whatnot, like you mind giving us just a quick touch base update on Swords and the Plowshares?
Oh no, yeah. We are in the phase. Look, we're raising money.
Okay,
let's be honest about that. We have written the request for qualifications. Which we will hope to give to our advisory council so they can look at it. The goal is to disseminate that request for qualifications in November, very late, early December.
Okay.
Leaving it out there for a little while, raising the funds. We want to bring as many as 5 artists to Charlottesville. We're going to engage in a series of conversations. The first one is October 24th. And I'm having it with Ian Grandison and C.L. Bohannon. And we're talking about environmental justice. And we're talking about cultural spaces, right?
Gotcha.
Because here the question is, again, back to the work, right? What we know is most of Charlottesville's public parks a good number of them began as plantations. But when they enter in the park system in 1926, they are automatically segregated spaces because 1926 is the racial integrity is the Public Assemblage Act, which is an addendum to the Racial Integrity Act, and the Public Assemblage Act makes it illegal for blacks and whites to occupy public space, right? So in 1926, Paul Goodalow McIntyre buys Washington Park. He buys McIntyre Park and he buys Belmont Park, right? When you think of that moment, 98% of park space is associated with whiteness and the other 2% black space, right? And that continues until you get what's known as Fifth Street Park and what is now today known as Tonsford Park, right? So we think about desegregation as a conversation largely about schools and counters and whatever. But it's about parks. Right. And not only about parks, but you get your national park, which was supposed to be for everybody. But your state parks, especially in the South, that's when racism lays over on top of it. Because the land for the state park is coming from either municipalities or from individuals. And the racial covenants. Remember racial covenants, right? That's what's laid on the park.
So how is the project Swords and the Plowshares engaging with, I assume, the city parks and recs?
We're trying. Yeah. We have been in conversation with them. We have given them some information about what we're doing. We've asked to keep us in the back of their minds as they're thinking about it. We're moving as quickly as we can because we want to do park tours in the same way we did the education to convince people that these were, in fact, mid-century racist monuments. We still need to educate our community. Our goal ultimately is to create a democratic process which sits in antithesis to the process that allowed those objects to go in the first place, which means we want to hear from Charlottesville. right? We want Charlottesville to come to these conversations. We want Charlottesville to educate themselves. So when we get to this place where we're looking at things, objects that are supposed to be representative of our equitable values here, but also in conversation with the other objects that have been built that are mostly about monuments to enslavement. We're asking the question, what does a monument in the 21st century look like? That is about, that takes into consideration the history of those parks, takes into consideration that even today within our DNA, Black people in this town only occupy certain parts.
So how much is racism still driving the driving force in all this?
And how much is self-selection the driving force in this? I mean, I know people who have said to me, I don't go to Belmont. Why don't they go to Belmont? Because Belmont used to be a dangerous place for them. What can you do that would allow a Black person to feel comfortable in Belmont Park? Which is not to say Black people don't feel comfortable in Belmont Park, but these are the conversations that one needs to engage in if one really wants to cause a community to be self-reflective and then think about what does it mean to put something on the landscape, right? Because we know what it meant in the past. How do we think about it in the future?
Right.
That's right. Yeah, safe space.
Yeah.
You know, like we all should feel comfortable.
Yeah.
But it makes me think though, how much of this is trauma? Like if I connect the dots of this conversation, like just the trauma of knowing whether it's like subconsciously or not, the fact of when we're in spaces with our families or we're in schools with certain names on the buildings, just the aura, right, of knowing that this wasn't safe for my ancestors, or like this person that I'm wearing on my shirt, or, you know, whatever it may be, like was someone who oppressed my people, right? So then if you take that trauma and then you try to say, all right, come learn about art, come learn about Alice Avery, while we should, it's almost like that needs to be instilled in us, whether we're the parents of the generation that instills that. But I could understand if people feel sort of a disconnect because they feel more traumatized by history than they see themselves in.
Well, I think that's the whole thing about it. And this is the other part of the conversation that I wanted to have, right? Because this is about capacity and who has the right to tell a story, right? And how does an institution like mine maintain a level of capacity? Right? We, you know, I can give you a whole lot of numbers. I brought them with me, even about, you know, the number of Black-led organizations in the country, right? The number of Black-led organizations in the arts, and then the number of Black-led organizations that have the size budget that we have. And I want to say to you all, the Heritage Center is doing pretty damn well.
Hey,
right?
That's right.
And not because we were handed anything, because we work hard.
That's right.
Right? But we can't do the work that we do if our community won't support us.
Big fact.
And I'm not saying, give me a dollar. I'm saying, hey, I need people to come and sit at my front desk. Right? Because if you come to the Heritage Center, there's only 4 of us that work there. We program almost 300 days out of the year. We can't get it done if we don't have volunteers.
That's right.
Right? We can't get it done if when we put in a new exhibition, you all don't come to the exhibition. Right? If you live here, it costs you nothing to enter our installation. Nothing. Right? It costs you 10 minutes practically. If depending on how you want to go through it. It can cost me 2 hours because I talk a long time, right? But we need people who want to learn this history and want to tell it. We need people who want to greet the community and make it a safe and comfortable place for them. We need people who want to work on our projects. I mean, we had 200 people at Green's Cook-Off. It takes 10 to 11 or 12 people to run Green's Cook-Off, right? We'd love it if our community would come to say to us and say, hey, we want to help you do Green's Cook-Off, right?
That's right.
Juneteenth is a huge undertaking for us, not alone the money, but what it takes to, find the number of people to walk in the parade, to work on the day, to make sure that parade is the thing that our public expects it to be.
Yeah.
Again, there's only 4 people who work there. Everything else that happens has to happen with help.
Yeah, volunteers.
With volunteers.
Yeah.
Right? I think about what I have heard people who participate with us, what they say about it. And they are changed.
Mm-hmm.
No one, and I'm not being, some people would describe me as arrogant.
Confident.
You?
Confident.
Not you.
I earned that, right? But I'm not overselling this.
Yeah.
Right? When I say this, because I can show it to you over and over and over and over again.
Yeah.
When you walk into the Heritage Center, when you spend time there, what you experience, you are irrevocably changed.
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
And I get it. It's intimidating, but it doesn't have to be intimidating.
That's right.
Especially when you walk in saying, I'm going in there to learn something about me.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I'm not coming in there to learn something about other things, because we don't do anything that isn't about Black people.
That's right. That's right.
Like nothing.
Yeah. It's important to remember too that the winner writes the history books.
Right.
You got to remember the winner writes the history books, and so we shouldn't have our mouth open. And I'm speaking to myself as well. We shouldn't have our mouth open when other folks come in and step up, volunteer, or want to take positions, whether it's board or whatever, because somebody has to get the work done. Now, it's on us if we want different representation. It's on us to be there again, to control our own narrative.
And those are the opportunities that we offer. And I think when you really when I think about what I have been trying to do now these 11 years is to engage all of this community in a sense of ownership and belonging, right? Ownership. Black people have the right to claim ownership here.
That's right.
No more or less than white people have the right, or anybody else who has the right to claim ownership.
Yeah.
Right. So, and when you can claim ownership, you feel like you belong here. Right?
That's right.
As you start to watch our demographics change, 2,000 people leaving the city of Charlottesville that are not being replaced. You're not going to get people to come into this city until they can see themselves in this space.
Yes, indeed.
Right? You walk into the Jefferson School, there is that opportunity. But if you walk into the Heritage Center, there are 2 things you learn: that this story is part of a national story, and this story consists of people who have done significant things to create Charlottesville in the way that it exists.
I have a question. Real quick.
Mm-hmm.
All right. This just came to me. Like, listening to you is very inspiring. Like, I can only imagine how the family is embracing this. But on the other hand, because of all that we as Black people have been through, right? How do we convince the people that would prefer not to be Black if they had their choice, because of the trauma, because of the struggle, because of the having to always prove yourself to be twice as good to get the same recognition, right? How do we get that demographic of people to embrace what is being freely given to them so that they can learn, yes, this might have been a tough time, but this is the resilience that you come from? Because the mindset here, everybody sitting here right now is not originally from here, right? And a lot of times I catch flack because I said the people that's doing things in the city a lot of times are not from here. And that is my truth. But if I'm talking to the people who come from here, whose grandparents is on the wall, or the little girl playing in the street in what was Vinegar Hill or Gospel Hill, how do I get them to embrace that look? and not look down upon it because it doesn't look like what 2024 looks like?
That's a really hard question. And if I had the full on answer to that, I'd be doing a lot of, I'd be doing better at this. I think that we have a place, right? And whatever happens, it's a place that is in existence. So if you never come in, there might be a reason that you come in on that day, on a day. And what I'm certain that you will find on that day that a person of color, Black person comes in, is a compelling story about themselves. Right? We have to see the work that we do as creating a space of permanence, creating some sense of stability when there had not been stability, right? This is a long game. The Heritage Center needs to exist long past me, right? Because this is a long game, right? This is the reason why this is about institution and the capacity for institution to hold narratives, right? If we were gone tomorrow, all the work would be gone. But if we're here 10 years from now, the chances are that someone will walk through here and see something is very high. And that takes me back to this idea that you're not going to walk in and see something that doesn't change you, right?
You know, I had a thought when you were talking earlier and you mentioned that the work that you do at the Heritage Center, these displays, these conversations being intimidating for people that they are about, but we're on the other side of the history. And before you came in today, we were actually having a brief conversation about Black people in the community working from or doing the work, community work from a place of pain or trauma. But something you said made me think about this, which is that, you know, as long as it has taken us, and I'm not trying to be a sympathizer, but trying to look at things from holistically, as long as it has taken us as Black people to be able to move away from, and still not all of us have done it, of doing advocacy and community work from a place of pain, to move away from that, shift away from that, you know, it would then be understandable that it may be just as difficult for those who were on the other side of history and administering the pain and trauma that we all and our ancestors dealt with, for it to be just as difficult for them to move away from the mindset, the racist mindset and ideologies that they and their families once had, to be able to engage with us in these spaces, understand our history, and in some way bridge some gaps so that we all have this sense of belonging here, but more from an equitable standpoint. So does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. And, you know, there's this place where you say an institution like the Heritage Center is a custodian. It's a custodian of these histories.
Yeah.
But our goal also is to be that custodian, not for ourselves necessarily, but for those people in the future. Right. And that's why I say creating the space of institution is important. Right. The work that I do and the narratives that we know about, our goal in providing them isn't so much to think about what's happening today. We want them certainly to inform decisions that are being made. We created the Center for Local Knowledge so that there would be this advocacy place, this policy place, this place where someone could come to us and say, I need this information because I'm about to do this thing. And because of our expertise, we can go find that information and be like, here you go. Right. But it's also a place where we teach, right? And we want to teach young people, and we want young people to see that so that they then become engaged in this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
The contemporary gallery sits right next to that permanent installation for a reason, right? It is a place where someone in this moment can actually see themselves through the artwork and then begin to sort of move around the place. We're interdisciplinary because we hope that somewhere along the line, whether you enter it through theater, whether you enter it through film, whether you enter it through exhibition, that there is a place where there is a meeting, and that meeting leads you to some more.
Yeah.
Right. I get this piece about of intimidation because people enter in these spaces feeling as if they're being asked to know something that they don't know already. Right. And what we're hoping is that our community first says, we trust you to be the steward of this thing that's important to us. And then says, we hope that through our participation, you're hearing us and listening, right? Because that's the thing about capacity. If you're not coming through the door, I don't know what you need. If you're not willing to work with me and tell me what you want, I can't get you what you need, right? That's why I came here, not just to talk about these exhibitions, but to also say, Charlottesville, 10, almost 11 years we've been here.
We here.
We're not going anywhere.
That's right.
Right? Our tagline is community-led, community-driven. We want you all to come in, volunteer with us. We don't have the capacity. The numbers that I can show you, there are 250 African-American arts, Black-led arts organizations in this country. The majority of those have budgets below $100,000, right? We're considered a mid-range institution because our budget is almost $1 million, right? But we still can't afford to do and hire all the people. Again, 4 people work there. We pay rent, right? We write grants for our exhibitions. We have salaries to pay, just and at the most basic levels to do that. And this institution could never have made it for 10 years if it weren't for the volunteers.
But Dr. Douglas, when you make an exhibition of IMHO talk show in 50 years, make sure I'm out in a fountain, with water coming out or something like that. Get my good side. That's all I You said ask for what you want, right? So I'm telling you what I want now.
All right. And I'm going to put that down on a piece of paper somewhere.
So we got it recorded.
Dr. Douglas, we talked about a lot, but did we hit all the high points in terms of events and things like that you want to cover?
Well, what's coming up is just to let everyone know that we will be starting to do a series of Thursday afternoon lunch tours. And then we're doing Saturday tours. So again, go to our website, sign up for a tour, come through. We're going to be sending out specific invitations to groups, right? We're really wanting to be as active as we can. Just to your point, how do we make this happen? It is a meeting of us and our community in order to do that. COVID slowed us down quite a bit. And so we're trying to gear back up and trying to get back to what we do well and hoping that our community, meaning our Black community, will come along with us.
And it speaks volumes to just still be standing post-COVID. Particularly when you're talking about like that you are a space that's all about congregating, right? And about traffic. So, so it speaks volumes of y'all's tenacity to still be standing.
We opened right away. When COVID happened, the Heritage Center opened. We had that moment when we were closed, but in September, the minute that we could open, we opened. And we opened because, you can walk into a gallery with nobody in there and you can just sit down. Right? The idea of respite and quiet, that's also part of it, right? You can just come in and sit. You don't have to participate. You don't have to engage. but you can be there with your own thoughts.
Yep.
Right. And sometimes that's a necessary thing. We've taken over and some additional space that was once part of Common Grounds. So we're working on trying to think through what it would look like if we could use that space as a meditative space.
Okay.
For our people, working with practitioners as a collective. So those are some of the things that we're doing that are coming online soon.
Awesome.
Yeah. Good work. Good work. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Rich conversation.